behalf of the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research at Georgia State University, I welcome you to the 7th Annual World Languages Week. CULTR, as the center is known, is one of 16 federally funded Title VI language resource centers in the United States. CULTR has created a unique identity around serving the needs of all students and the communities they represent by helping to promote language learning opportunities as part of 21st century global education. Guided by its core values of access, advocacy, outreach, and research, CULTR has gained a national reputation for innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, regardless of their socioeconomic and ethnic background. My name is Rory Prine. I am a study abroad advisor at Georgia State University's Office of International Initiatives. I would like to thank you for being here with us today for the Study Abroad Scholarship Opportunities panel, which I will be moderating. Before introducing the panelists, I'd like to address a couple of housekeeping and technical questions. First, I would like to remind everyone that all panels this week are being recorded and will be available after the event. All attendees will remain muted throughout the entire session. If for some reason your connection is interrupted during the panel discussion, simply rejoin with the same link that you used previously. Our panel discussions are approximately 35 to 40 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A with our attendees. Students may submit questions throughout the course of the discussion by using the Q&A box, clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. If you like any questions you see, you can also thumbs up the icon to promote the question to the top of the list. And this panel session will conclude at 1 o'clock today. Now it's time to meet our panelists. First, I would like to allow Iman Mohammed to introduce themselves.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Iman Mohammed. I am a second-year MA student here at Georgia State. I study international and comparative politics, and I finished my bachelor's in political science here last summer. So I was a 4+1 student originally and just kind of transitioned into my graduate program. Right now, I'm a teacher assistant, so I'm a TA for the Model UN, African Union, and Arab League courses here at the Political Science Department, and I intern at the Carter Center at the Democracy Program. So yeah.
Thank you, Iman. Ayana?
Hello, my name is Deanna Williams. I am also a second-year MA student here at Georgia State. My master's is in applied linguistics. I did not go to Georgia State for undergrad. I went to University of South Alabama, where I got my bachelor's in French and Spanish language and literature. Right now, I am working as a grad assistant for a study abroad, and I also teach outside of school as well. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you both. All right, so we've already kind of began with introductions, but I want to allow for more space to speak about our academic journeys and professional journeys as well, as they are in development. So you already mentioned both of you are currently master's students or in some form of graduate program right now. Could you speak a little bit about what do you hope to professionally do after you graduate? Ayana, would you be able to start?
Absolutely. So after I graduate, I hope to work, well, my number one goal is to work for a nonprofit and to work towards integrating more study abroad awareness and knowledge in high school. And if I cannot do that, of course, I am more than willing to teach ESL because that is also a field that needs attention. So yeah.
Thank you. And Iman?
Ayana, you kind of said what I was going to say, but I am interested in nonprofit. More specifically though, studying political science and then going back into a political science program for grad school. I'm interested in joining an international organization and working in a global institution, specifically in migration and refugees, because that's what I'm interested in. And that's kind of where my language study comes into place. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I will be serving as moderator, but I also myself am a recent graduate from my graduate degree program as well. So in a very similar path to Ayana, I graduated from the University of Arizona with an emphasis with the Master's of German Studies with an emphasis on pedagogy, literature, and culture. So my emphasis was predominantly on foreign language learning. After completing my master's degree, I decided to look more into what it means to work in international education. And that's currently where I find myself now in a role of administrative, which is another possibility in terms of professional development or professional career options for someone interested in international education, global education, or languages. All right. Speaking of languages, I kind of referenced a language that I'm interested in personally, which is German. For many years prior to my current role as an administrator at Georgia State University, I was a foreign language teacher. I more specifically taught German in the United States, but then I also taught English when I was abroad in Germany. So I would love to hear more about the language that either of you have studied or are currently studying. Aman, would you be able to start?
Yeah, so my minor in undergrad was Arabic, so I studied Arabic. Um, and I was really interested in Arabic because I had a very strong base, and then like it was the first language I learned how to read and write, but not speak, for like religious reasons. So I kind of there was a gap with like me understanding, like I knew how to read and write it, but I didn't know how to speak it. So I minored in Arabic, and the Arabic department here is actually really amazing. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Dr. Campbell, but he's a great professor. And so I studied classical Arabic here at Georgia State, and then did a study abroad program that's based in Jordan, Amman, Jordan, in colloquial Jordanian Arabic. So that's what I studied. And just like I mentioned earlier, Arabic is one of the six UN languages. And I've been working in Clarkson for a couple of years now since I started my undergrad, where there's a lot of refugees. So I was able to use the Arabic that I learned through my study abroad program and also through the programs here at Georgia State in my work with and like the refugee work that I did. So my language studies and like my actual career interests ended up overlapping. So yeah.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Ayana?
So my path was not nearly as exciting as Iman's. I learned Spanish first and then I studied French. I chose to learn Spanish because I wanted to learn a foreign language. I don't want to say it was a whim, but it started off as a whim, but then I fell in love with the language. And as I continued to learn, I was like, oh, Spanish is like one of the most spoken languages in the United States, you know? And I was like, it's kind of weird that it's not like widely taught in schools. And so from there, I went to undergrad, and as part of my degree program, I had to study abroad. However, that study abroad experience and even that cultural immersion came back later when I started helping my community in a tutoring program. And we had Spanish speaking kids there who needed a buffer between the English and the Spanish because they did not have any formal English language instruction yet. So that was more or less my path in terms of language.
Great, thank you. So you kind of alluded to this is one opportunity that many students have when they start their university careers, either at the undergraduate or graduate level, is the ability to tap into something called a study abroad program. So a study abroad program is an academic program whereby a student goes to a foreign country or foreign countries and they are receiving academic credit, whether it's formal credit or maybe they are looking into international internships or any of the variety. Many cases, students are going for short-term programming where maybe it's a faculty-led, taught by an instructor at their university, and they are helping the students through a period of a few weeks while they are abroad. Or maybe it's an exchange program, much like what I did when I was an undergraduate, where I went abroad for a year and I took classes at my foreign university, in this case in Germany, and I transferred it back to my home institution in the United States. So I'm going to ask both of you once again is what motivated you to consider a study abroad program centered around language learning? And can you tell us a little bit more about the programs you participated in? Ayana, would you be able to start?
So first, it was required for my degree program. However, I don't think anyone takes a foreign language class without, wanting to actually go to the country the language is spoken in and wanting to like use their skills. So in the back of my mind, it has always been, oh, I'm learning this language. I want to go experience the culture for myself. I want to go apply what I learned. And so doing that, I went on a faculty-led program to Cuenca, Spain, good old Cuenca, Spain. It's like this mountainous region in Spain. And I pretty much it was 6 weeks, which is like fairly short for any real cultural immersion, but it was still very useful to me and it was still a very valuable experience for me.
Thank you. Iman, would you like to add a little bit more about your experiences?
Yeah, so I actually had a very unique experience because I participated virtually. I did not go to my country in person because I was awarded, I was admitted into my program fall of 2019. I was awarded my scholarships fall of 2019. And then the big thing happened in March 2020 where no one was able to go. But the interesting thing is I feel the virtual program that I participated in, it was based in the country I was supposed to go to, and it was very immersive, even though it was online. So I still got to learn a lot. I was scheduled to go to this program by the Council of International Educational Exchange, called CIEE, and I ended up going to a more local online school in Jordan called CJAL Institute, which was very nice because I would have gotten a more classical Arabic experience at CIEE, and I ended up getting a more like localized language learning kind of experience. And I was able to learn a lot of because what our school did was they had a lot of virtual cultural programs like films and literature, and we had very like personalized courses. We would learn about like the literature of Palestine or like cooking in Jordan, and so I really feel like I didn't miss out on a lot of things that I thought I would have. So it was really amazing. And even though I couldn't go in person, after I finished my study abroad program, me and my family had traveled to Turkey that summer, and I was able to meet a lot of Syrian refugees and actually practice my Arabic with them. So it was really nice. And I think that something that it taught me was not to shy away from virtual programs. Even though you might think that won't be helpful, it was really helpful because those programs are designed to immerse you as much as possible. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Now that we've spoken about what a study abroad program is, one major question that many students have when they are considering their options is, how do I fund it? So the next question is going to be, so what are the funding options available to students in order to finance their study abroad program? Aman, would you be able to start?
Yeah. So I guess something that a lot of students don't know, and like even the people who I've talked to when they ask me about my study abroad, they're like, oh my God, how'd you go? Or like, how could you afford it? It's like, well, there are scholarships. So there are a lot of funding opportunities, and a lot of these funding opportunities support students that are low income or first generation, or for people who've never traveled outside the United States. The funding opportunities that I used was the Gilman Scholarship and the Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowship, which is the FLAS from the Atlanta Global Studies Center. And Gilman, for example, is geared more towards students who have financial aid, or like are low income students. And then FLAS is open to both undergrad and graduate students. So there were both great opportunities. And I was given a lot of support from the study abroad department when I was applying, from the honors college. And so there's a lot of opportunities out there that are catered to you. I know there's a lot of STEM students who say that they don't know if they can go, but there's a lot of, like, the Bourne Scholarship is out there. So there are a lot of different opportunities. You just have to go and find them. And luckily, Georgia State is a school that has a lot of support for students who are interested in those things. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Ayana?
So because I went abroad for Spanish, I was not as competitive in the Gilman Scholarship as other people were, like Iman, who was studying Arabic, of course. However, I funded my study abroad, and my scholarships covered everything but my plane ticket, I believe. So my funding mostly came from departmental scholarships, because the foreign languages department wants you to go abroad and use what you learned. And so my scholarships came from there in the study abroad office. And I also did some outside searching for scholarships. So where I was going to undergrad, there was this family who specifically had scholarship money set aside to help students who had never been abroad before go study abroad. And so with saying that, my advice is to look and apply for as many scholarships, oh my goodness, as you can. and from there, just apply to all of them and just do your best. I'll be back in just a second.
No problem. My light just went out too. Time sensitive, I suppose. All right. I want to kind of add on that as well, as both Mana and Ayana kind of referenced two or multiple ways that a student can receive funding towards their study abroad program. At one level, it's institutional. Maybe your institution itself has funding available to students in order to participate in education abroad opportunities. I'm going to speak more specifically from Georgia State. So one opportunity that Georgia State students have in order to fund their study abroad opportunity is through the IEF and the IAS scholarship. It's a fantastic scholarship opportunity, which can support students from anywhere from $1,000 all the way up to $7,500 towards their study abroad program, which is quite a significant amount of funding. But then also kind of what Ayana mentioned as well is departmental level specific scholarships that might be specific to students in your major or in your program that can also be applicable to your study abroad program. Your study abroad program is academic at the end of the day, so it is something that is relevant to your studies and it's something that you can receive support for. And then kind of going back to Iman's comment about nationally competitive scholarships, such as the FLAS, the Boren, Gilman, these are fantastic scholarship opportunities that really serve students in multiple ways. So in one way, it helps you fund your ability to go abroad in that moment on that experience, but that's also something that you really should kind of carry with you into your next experiences, something you add to your resume. So for example, when I completed my undergraduate degree, one opportunity that I looked out for was the ability to be mobile again. I wanted to go abroad before starting my graduate degree. So I found myself looking more specifically for scholarship or fellowship opportunities for recent graduates. And in my case, I was fortunate enough to be selected for something called the Fulbright program, which is a US government Department of State fellowship program for recent graduates and graduate students to either support research or either education. So in my case, I was an ETA, which was an English teaching assistant. So it was an ability for me to go abroad, teach English for a year. And it's something that I carry with me now. It helped me get abroad in that moment, but having my Fulbright is something that has really benefited me and my academic progression, getting accepted into graduate school, and also my professional development, something I tap into a lot. So there's so many opportunities out there. So definitely check them out. All right, so how were you able to find available scholarships? And did you use any search engines or any on-campus services to help you find these scholarships? Ayana, would you be able to start?
Sure. So I was peeking in the chat and I saw a question about departmental scholarships. So naturally, when you go to college, you're assigned an advisor for your major. I formed very close bonds with my teachers. And naturally, at the time, I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to go abroad. Are there any scholarships available to me within the department or just in general that I should know about? And through my faculty mentors and even advisors, I was able to find out more about scholarships. There was also a search engine provided for us through the Study Abroad office at the time. And so even just good old Google at times was helping me find scholarships. Like Ori and Iman both said, there's a plethora of scholarships out there for literally almost anything in terms of going to study abroad. So it's more of a question of going and getting it yourself and actually asking for help in terms of finding scholarships.
Great, thank you. Iman, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just because I also I was at JSU for undergrad, I'll give some context to what we have here. I remember in undergrad, I was in the honors college. So the honors college had a lot of resources, but the study abroad department, they have everything for you. I remember when initially, I knew what program I wanted to go on, but I didn't know how I'd get there, in terms of getting funding and stuff. And our study abroad department has this sheet with scholarships on it. So I grabbed it, I highlighted the ones I was eligible for, and I applied. And once you decide the opportunity that you want to pursue, that's kind of where your journey begins. But in terms of are there opportunities out there? There are, you just have to ask or you have to go look for them, and it's not that hard. I know that the GSU study department has a search engine for scholarships and also for programs. So a lot of this information is very, very accessible. You just have to go out there and look, and there's lots of staff out there who are willing to support you and guide you throughout that process, which is what my experience was like.
Great, thank you. So this might be a little bit specific, but I'm curious to see your experience with your scholarship. One thing that you often see with many scholarships, not even the study abroad itself, is there might be something called a follow-up service project. I'm curious if either of you had to complete a follow-up service project for your scholarships, your fellowships, wherever it may be, and if you could tell us a little bit about it, or if you did not, do you have any recommendations on what that could potentially look like, or what could a student do as a follow-up service project? I'll let you choose who goes first this time.
So my follow-up project was the usual reflection, which is required for most scholarships. But I also had to do a few presentations about my study abroad, and that was from the outside scholarship. And it was just to make sure that I was upholding their motto or their creed in terms of studying abroad. So spreading like my experience to others in the hope that other people would go study abroad as well. So that was what my follow-up project was for my scholarship.
I did have a follow-up service project for Gilman, and then for the FLAS, I had more of like a evaluation and an interview. And you can actually see it if you go to the Global Studies Center website. But for Gilman, I'm actually doing my follow-up service project right now, and so you are supposed to go and find a specific project where you would like fulfill the requirements of the follow-up service. And I'm participating in this program called Reach the World, which is like people who have studied abroad or who are currently studying abroad will share their experiences with like primary school age children through their teachers will like virtual call you, and then the kids will like watch you and you'll tell them about what it's like to travel abroad, or you write like elementary school level blog entries. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's actually pretty fun. So yeah, you can be really creative with your follow-up service projects. Originally, I had planned on going like back into Clarkson and sharing study abroad opportunities with first generation children, but I changed it to participating with Reach the World. So it can be really creative, and it can also help you kind of continue practicing that language or whatever you studied in your initial study abroad program. So it's really nice.
Thank you. All right. Next question is, so it's a little bit actually backtracking. It's going to speak more about the application process itself for a study abroad scholarship more specifically. In many scholarships, you're going to have to submit either a writing sample, statement of grand purpose, a community engagement project. Usually it's a short essay, maybe anywhere from 1 to 2 pages, kind of detailing, what do you hope to either learn or what do you hope to eventually bring back to your community? So in this case, maybe the Atlanta community or anything like that, the GSU community. So I wanted to see if either of you have any advice on the writing process for study abroad scholarships, and if there are any important points that a student should identify while within their study abroad scholarship essay. Ayan or Iman?
I'll go first. Yeah, so the first thing I will say, especially with study abroad, it's very like time sensitive, right? So especially in terms of your scholarship essays, plan early. That is the one thing I can stress, because these aren't long essays, but each word matters and each word counts. So really make sure you're answering all the questions, because obviously it's a scholarship, you have to prove why you should be funded to go and complete your studies. So really focus on visualizing how the program or the scholarship you're applying for will help you grow as a student and will contribute to your professional career in the future. So you really have to map those things out and then put them into words, and really just show the scholarships why you're a candidate that they should support, and what would make their funds worth it. You know, like what will you contribute when you come back? And a lot of scholarships really want to see how you can you contribute to the intercultural exchange of like exchanging American culture with whatever culture you're about to immerse yourself in. So really thinking about like what will you contribute after finishing your studies, and like the most important thing for me during that process was using the writing lab, or like the writing center here at Georgia State. They supported me so much. Like each paragraph I wrote, I would go back to them. We would review it like 10 times, like every word counts. So, you know, make sure you answer the questions and plan early. That's what I would say.
Yeah, Iman basically said everything that could be said. I would like to provide heavy emphasis on selling yourself as a scholarship applicant. Very much explain in detail and concisely why you are the best candidate. A lot of these scholarship entities want to know where their money is going and how it's going to benefit, I don't want to say benefit them, but benefit the overall global community by giving it to you. So yes, like I said, Iman said just about everything, using on-campus resources like the Writing Center. And even at Georgia State, we have writing workshops for students, especially for the Gilman. So just a lot of resources at your fingertips if you just kind of poke around and look for them.
Great, thank you both. I want to add a little bit to that as well. So like they mentioned, we have such as the Writing Lab, Writing Center on campus. Aman also mentioned to kind of honors college, there is resources such as the Nationally Competitive Scholarships and Fellowship Office. There's Honors College that is open not only to students who belong to the Honors College. They are incredibly helpful when it comes to getting feedback on your application materials, anything like that. But you also have your study abroad office. So in the case of GSU, myself and my colleagues, many of us were in your shoes at one point where we were applying for scholarships. And now many of us are professionals in the field. A lot of us have actually served now on the review committees for a lot of these nationally competitive scholarships. So we've kind of seen it in multiple lenses. So we can give you a lot of feedback and support in the writing process and making sure, like Ayana said, that you're really advocating for yourself. Kind of one thing I really want when students kind of meet with me to speak about their essays, one thing I really kind of want to make sure that they leave this session with is this understanding that when you do go about writing your scholarship essays, I really want to make sure that when I'm reading it, I kind of learn who you are. I think there's a lot of things, many kind of pitfalls that a student might come into when they are writing for a study abroad scholarship, where maybe they get too focused on talking about, I love Spain because of XYZ. Spain is, the the most incredible country because of reason XYZ. But by using that space to speak about your destination and stuff like that, you're kind of losing that opportunity to really advocate for yourself and provide your reader kind of that image of who you are and why you really, really do want this. I think it's what Aman said earlier is they're generally quite short, actually. Many of these essays are maybe a page and a half, which sounds like, oh, cool, that's something that's really easy to write. I could maybe do that in an afternoon. But it actually is quite tricky, to be honest, because you have to be very concise with your words and you have to make sure that you're using that space to your advantage in every line. So definitely tap into your resources. There's so many out there. Many students don't realize the resources they have on campus. So definitely whenever you're considering applying for not even state abroad scholarships, but maybe scholarships or anything else that are trying to support your academic progression, or even when you get towards the end of your undergraduate degree and you're looking at professionals such as writing a cover letter or resume, there's so many resources on campus that you should definitely be tapping into over your time. Right. I think I already actually kind of ran into our next question. So our next question was going to be about, do you have any resources on campus to help you prepare for your scholarship applications? So I just want to reiterate: Writing Center, Career Center, Study Abroad Center, Nationally Competitive Scholarships Fellowships Office if your university has one. There's so many resources on campus, departmental. Also, when you are, pursuing your academic career, you're probably going to make, develop relationships and bonds with your faculty, your fellow cohort, like your fellow students. They can also be peer advisors or provide also additional input. So definitely tap into the resources and with the connections that you make over your time of your studies. Aman, Ayana, do you want to add anything to that? No problem. All right. Then This question is going to be a little bit of a turn. So what advice would you have for high school seniors considering studying languages at the university level? First steps, kind of like how to kind of start thinking about this process early, because it's always best to plan early, especially when it comes to study abroad.
Something that I would say, because I remember I knew that I wanted to study Arabic when I was going to college. And I've talked to people in high school who have talked to me about like, studying the language. And something I would say is before you enter like the courses at a university level, try to immerse yourself at a small scale. It might be through media, it might be through visiting communities around you. And it might be through little things like getting like a basic grasp of like the grammar of the language or like the base of the language. I'm not saying study the language, but I am saying like dip your feet into like that entire sphere before you get into it, because university level language courses are pretty serious, and there's some pretty like obviously very great opportunities in terms of studying language. So I think that before you dedicate to it at the university level, like just get a clear idea of it. Maybe watch a show in that language. Try to read the newspaper in that language. Something I used to do was listen to the news in Arabic just to see like, do I really want to study this? And kind of getting used to hearing it more often. So I would say just try to get like a small taste, small dose of it before you enter. And then that would be a good way to prep yourself from before you begin. But one last thing is that having linguistic skills, especially if you do study abroad, gives you the opportunity to gain like a global perspective, which is something that regardless of what field you're in, whether it be the humanities or STEM, like it's a really important skill. So to always keep that in mind as well.
Oh yeah, similar to Aman, I knew I was going to study Spanish in college. I did not actually pick up French until my junior year in college. And in addition to like dipping your feet into the language, I would definitely say be prepared to work work hard. Not to say that, language courses in university are just heinous or anything like that, but it's gonna be like learning how to walk all over again in a different language, even though like mentally you're matured and you want to say, oh, all of these fanciful things that you can easily say in English, starting over in a different language can be frustrating. And so I would like to say, if you do plan to study a language at the college level, be patient with yourself and also persevere in that language, because it's like you wake up one day and you're like, huh, I can say all of these things in this language. When did I know how to do that? So I definitely want to say it's worth it above all things. And the linguistic skills that you learn from it. Once you learn one language, it's easier to learn a third language and then a fourth language and then a fifth language. So that's what I would say.
Definitely. Thank you both. Yeah, really have to attune to that. As a former foreign language teacher myself, I'm always going to be advocating for foreign language as part of any student's curricula. So definitely start it. Even if you have an inkling, like Mom said, expose yourself into like the little mouse. Maybe you'll find a very, interesting connection with the language. But definitely look into it. But kind of our final question before we go into the Q&A round is, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently when it came to study abroad, maybe choosing a different program, going at a different time, different place? Is there anything you would change?
I'm coming off mute first because absolutely, I would go earlier. Like I said, I did 2 languages in undergrad, and like right now, my biggest regret is that I didn't get a chance to be immersed in French culture. Like I got the opportunity to go to Spain and like use my Spanish, but once you go the first time, it's kind of like ripping off a band-aid. Like all the fears that you possibly had about going to study abroad kind of vanish once you do it. It's like, oh, this isn't like too different from being back home in terms of like the fears that you had before you went. But I would definitely go sooner, go longer. I would also go to a different country. I would end up going to France or a francophone country or maybe even a different Spanish speaking country. But that's literally the only regret I have. And that's not even that big of a regret in hindsight. So yeah.
I'm glad you answered that question first, Ayana, because my only regret is that COVID-19 happened. And that's something that I can't predict. But for me, it was like at the time that I applied, that was the perfect time that I had applied. When I had applied and got in and everything, I was a sophomore. By the time I did my program, I was like a senior, like pushing it. So because of COVID-19, I really wasn't able to like, I would say get the full experience, but I'm not regretful. And so I think that things are warming up now, and like COVID, like we have vaccines, and like travel restrictions are being lifted. So like I don't have any regrets. And I think that because of the support that I received from the university, I was pretty like happy about all my decisions that I made in terms of study abroad, other than like a global pandemic happening. But yeah, I wouldn't do anything differently. So, and the country that I was scheduled to go to was one of the like only countries where like one of the only countries, one of the only other countries where they taught the kind of Arabic that I wanted to learn. So there's really not much options there. But yeah.
I think whenever I try to reflect on my undergraduate experience, I was very, very quick to my decision. I had a friend who had done the exchange program the year prior to me going. So I kind of listened, purely from her feedback. I was like, okay, cool. This makes sense to me. It gets me to Germany. Every city in Germany is the same. Wrong. Like, I should have explored my options, I think, a lot more. Maybe kind of consider, what do I really want to gain out of that experience? And I was very, very fortunate, I think, in kind of the opportunity that my university had with this exchange program and its location, because it conveniently hit a lot of kind of the bullet points I wanted to get out of my international experience. I think kind of similar to both of you is I think I would have liked to potentially go in another opportunity, maybe plan a little bit earlier, because I really also, even though I started learning languages, my very first semester of undergrad, for some reason, study abroad just didn't click with me. It just didn't seem like a possibility for me. It just didn't seem eligible. It was high financial need. I just didn't see that as any way being humanly possible. And I also found myself talking myself out of even applying to a lot of scholarship opportunities. I was essentially my own, worst villain. I thought, there's no reason why they would give me this opportunity. I'm not even going to, even attempt to apply. But that's it's a losing battle already. There's so many opportunities out there, and many students actually don't really know that these opportunities exist. So definitely start thinking about it early, and have that confidence in yourself. Like you can do it. Like highly recommend it. But yeah, so that was our final question. I want to thank you both for sharing your insight. And now we're going to turn it over to the Q&A. So I believe there should be some in there. I'm not sure if Pernell, you would like to unmute and kind of say them, or if we can kind of read through them.
Sure. So we have the first question. What media, shows, networks, podcasts, etc., do you watch or listen to or read in your specific target language to help you enhance your language skills?
I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I read the news in Spanish. I also am a very avid music listener. So I listen to a lot of artists who are from Spanish speaking countries. So everybody knows Bad Bunny and, Daddy Yankee, all of that nature. Everyone knows Selena. So I mostly listen to music to maintain like my rhythm of the language, no pun intended. But yeah, I don't really listen to many podcasts at all, which is kind of ironic. But yeah.
To answer that question, yeah, I listen and read the news in Arabic, and I subscribe to like Arabic newsletters, like because I love email newsletters, or like when certain, because I like to receive like the news every day in my inbox, and I'll like click the setting for receiving it in Arabic. And the news in Arabic, they speak classical Arabic, so that's something I understand very well. And also because I do study politics, I try to make sure that I'm consuming like Arabic that's in like political language so that I don't forget those words. I do listen to podcasts in Arabic, and I don't listen to any English music to just always like stimulate my brain and like always pick up Arabic all the time. I listen to the news like BBC and Al Jazeera in Arabic, and films like Netflix Middle East. That is something that I do all the time. Like I try to only watch shows in Arabic. So yeah, and I also have talked to people in my life who speak the language. I'll like communicate with them through WhatsApp. I'll keep in touch with my student friends, like classmates or my teacher in Arabic. So yeah, just kind of implementing it in my daily life.
I think with a lot of kind of media, you have to be very intentional to kind of find it, especially in kind of the American media space, where there's a lot of English content being produced and replicated. Sometimes it has to be very intentional for you to kind of interact with something products of a foreign language, essentially. So even in the case of German, I find myself having to be very intentional. Either subscribing, like the mom said, to like newsletters or content that's produced in Germany. You can also be quite clever, with your phone. You can change things such as your regional location, or kind of say in the case your iPhone language, to provide you kind of that passive engagement, stuff like that for your language learning. But we also live in a beautiful time of technology where the accessibility is there, but it has to be intentional. So in many cases, maybe Netflix, Hulu, any type of streaming service, they're kind of developing, their breadth of foreign language content. And many times, especially when you're kind of in your, maybe your first stages of language learning, I always kind of recommended, maybe finding a book that's written in maybe in English or your native language, and then finding it translated officially, and then using that because you already know the story. You can kind of work slowly, develop context clues, whatever it may be, and that can kind of help you learn language in a different way, such as a literary type of practice. But definitely.
Wait.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
so one more thing. Rory mentioned getting a book that you're familiar with. You can also look at memes in different languages too. So a lot of the times the images are universal and you know the meaning behind the image, but just a sort of passive engagement with the language in itself is another way too. And plus you guys are like younger, so you may be more interested in memes.
It's definitely a great option as well. Everyone loves memes. So next question. So you all talked about, I guess in preparation for your experiences, you talked about how you engaged in various types of media. How else did you study, prepare for your study abroad or scholarship experience?
Prepare. I did not prepare. I know I was taking higher level, so like 3000 level, which is like writing papers in Spanish and like debating in Spanish and stuff like that. I was taking those courses right up until the summer I went and studied abroad. So I guess you could say that was my preparation. In terms of like using the language to like get around places and just having a conversation with other people, I don't think there's a way you can really prepare to do that. You kind of just have to jump in terms of like getting a taxi. You can practice the lines, but like until you're actually in it, it's a different experience altogether. Yeah.
Just to like piggyback off of what Ayana said, for me, so I had already completed every level of Arabic classes we even provided here at Georgia State. So my professor couldn't do anything except me just take a bunch of independent study courses and have like one-on-one study with him. So what I did was I was an Arabic tutor at our language lab, which is I think First Floor Langdale for a while, so that I would tutor students, making sure like my memory is fresh of Arabic. And then like the summer before starting the program, or like the semester before, I had found like a local Arabic tutor who spoke the dialect that I was about to get into. So I would have like weekly sessions with her. She would kind of warm up my memory of like colloquial Arabic. So I also was consuming much more Arabic media before starting my program, just so like, I would go into it knowing what I was about to learn. And what ended up happening when I started my program was that they ended up moving me a level up, because I guess like my preparation kind of helped me assess where I was better. So it is important to prepare because it's really easy for language skills to get dusty. So
Awesome. And we have another question asking, what was the hardest part about your study abroad experience?
For me personally, where I was, my host family didn't speak a lick of English. The only other people who spoke English were the people who came with me on my program and the faculty member who came with us, but I did not spend most of my time with them. So I would say just adjusting to having to reintroduce yourself in a way, to like a new culture, or just becoming more comfortable with not being in a space that you're familiar with, if that makes sense. I think that was the hardest part, but even that got better over time.
For me, I would say because I was in a virtual program, I did not have that experience of like being forced to like address the language barriers, because when I turned off my computer, I was here in Atlanta. So the hardest part was holding myself accountable into creating that immersive experience for myself and making sure that I was implementing my own little practices outside of like my online class, so that I was like constantly learning. So kind of keeping myself accountable, but I don't think this is going to be a common experience for anyone anymore. But if anyone does do a virtual program, then yeah.
And we have another question. Some of you mentioned that you received scholarships, and so or different types of scholarships, whether university level or national level. Can you share what was the screening process like? How long was it?
So that one is definitely going to be very specific to the scholarship itself, whether it's institutional, departmental, nationally competitive. In the case of like nationally competitive scholarships, you definitely want to kind of budget for more time and also an earlier application period generally than maybe something that's done at the institutional level. So, kind of speaking from my experience as a Fulbright applicant so I applied to Fulbright the fall of my senior year of undergrad. And the screening process for that actually took well into the spring semester. So it was about 6 to 8 months, I believe, of me going through the application process, submitting it, I believe in September, doing an initial round of interviews with my university representatives. And then for this program more specifically, it goes through multiple levels, whether it goes to the institutional level, where in my case, I went to Kansas State University. My university approved me to move on to the next stage of the Fulbright program, which then went to the US national level, and eventually to the international level. So there are several months between each of those processes, which can be very, very daunting and can feel very, very long. That was definitely one of the longer ones I've seen. But in the cases of, say like the Gilman, where the Gilman, generally students are able to apply to that one about 3 to 4 months prior to departure, generally say you want to go abroad, the spring semester of your sophomore year, you're able to apply for the Gilman for its October cycle. And, in that time, your review process takes about a month and a half. And eventually you can find out whether or not you've been selected for an award. It really does depend on the scholarship and at what level it is. I'm not sure if either of you have any kind of experience or want to add anything to that.
I think I was an early applicant for Gilman, but I would just say, like, just echoing what you said, Rory, like planning early, even though scholarships may have, like, it just might be a semester-based thing, but planning early is important, and kind of looking into being an early applicant might be a good option too. But the timelines just aren't that tight, but you still should plan early.
Thanks for sharing. Next question, when is a good time to study abroad if I'm considering it?
There is no right answer for that one, I think is what I'm going to start with. And then of course, Iman and I can correct me if I'm wrong. Um, it really does depend on your university. In some universities, you might be able to go abroad as early as your first semester. Maybe your university has a first year transition program or something like that. Or maybe your university requires you to have an institutional GPA established, which you don't receive until after you complete your first semester on campus. When it comes to kind of like general, you often see a lot of students go abroad during their sophomore or junior year, and some students go abroad their senior year. But if I kind of had to give advice to students who are considering going abroad, especially if you're considering going abroad for maybe an academic year or a long-term experience, is being really mindful in the classes that you select early. One thing that I always kind of recommend is if you can hold on to maybe your general elective courses or anything that might be outside of your core studies. Those are generally classes that are usually really easy to kind of find foreign equivalencies to in order to make the transfer process a lot more smoother. But that doesn't mean that, if you do go abroad during your senior year or your junior year and you're more of like your upper level core classes, then there's not going to be options for you. It might be require, an extra signature to kind of get that approval for. But yeah.
I was just gonna say, I agree wholeheartedly. I studied abroad the summer before my senior year. Personally, in my experience, it's just very difficult to get things done the longer you wait in terms of study abroad because the courses offered to you are, there's a less diverse amount of courses available for you. I know, here we go again. I know for my program, they had to actually create classes for a certain group of students because we had already taken all the higher level Spanish courses offered at our university. So that's just my piece on that.
There is no specific year. Like I actually did it this summer. I basically graduated, but I just did it because I had to wait so long because of COVID. And it wasn't helpful and it was really hard. But I would just say if you're a freshman that wants to do it, just keep in mind your experience. Like with the language, again, like if you're taking beginner courses or anything like that, especially in terms of the argument you want to make in your scholarship essay, like just consider the year that you are and then your experience with the language and how you're going to make the argument for that. So that's just something to consider if you want to map out when you want to do it.
Thank you all for sharing. And we have another question that has received quite a bit of interest. How can students get a jump start from a younger age than mentioned? Are there any other opportunities for cultural immersion in high school? Or maybe you can share some things that you may have done when you were in high school or younger.
You want to go ahead?
No, you can go, Roy. It's fine.
Okay. I know when I was in high school, which don't quote me on, that was like 10 years ago. I promise, I'm not old. When I was in high school, I was always very intentional about getting as an international experience as possible. I always had a love for languages. And I know my high school had what was at that time, I think it was called AFS. I think they may have changed name now. It used to be the American Field Services. And what it was an organization that really looked at developing international partnerships. And they was often sending high school students on exchange programs where whether, it was American student going abroad to, a foreign country or the American high school accepting a foreign student from somewhere else in the world. That is one way to kind of think of that. Also, your community engagement. Maybe there is resources such as community sites where, maybe ESL or tutoring services type of, there's so many like community activities, especially here in Atlanta. There's just such a breadth or whatever city you might be remoting in from.
I like to say when I was in high school, not quite 10 years ago, but close. I actually, in my Spanish program in high school, we had something called Special Projects Week. It was like a week in the winter where we did activities based on like the subject that we chose. And my Spanish teacher actually took us to Puerto Rico. So I would say depending on where you are and what you do, it could be going to Puerto Rico for a week. It could be, just engaging with your local Spanish speaking community in your city. Um, there's no one way, no right way to immerse yourself in the culture or the language early. So it's just about what's available to you and what you can do at the time.
I just want to add something because my high school didn't have that, and I kind of got a head start by like doing community engagement. But in high school, I used to tutor Syrian refugees, so young in English, and so that's kind of something that I did to kind of learn the language. And also, Christy had sent earlier the link to the Aleph Institute, which is like an Arabic institute here in Atlanta. I used to go to their events and kind of get an idea of what Arabic culture was like. And also I basically would participate in like Arabic speaking community events and things like that. So Atlanta's a really diverse city. So I think anything you want to look into, I think there's an opportunity for it. But yeah, community engagement is a good place to start, I would say, for young people, especially in high school.
It's great, all great tips. I'm sure our audience will definitely love those. So just one last question to wrap up. What was your favorite memory from your study abroad program?
All of my best memories from Spain, I was in a taxi, which is hilarious thinking about it now. But I remember, first of all, it was torrential downpour, which was unusual for the part of Spain I was in. And it was nighttime. So clearly, this is the setup for a horror movie. But I called a taxi and got in the taxi, and we just had like a casual conversation, even though I was like drenched and probably looked pitiful. Um, his name was Miguel. He was just like this super wise old man. And we just talked about life. And when I got to my homestay, I was short on money for my cab ride. And I was like, oh my goodness, give me just a second. I'll go inside and grab the rest of it and give it to you. And he was like, oh, no, 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 don't worry about it. He was like, we're neither rich nor poor. So don't worry about, trying to make up the difference. This isn't going to like make me or break me. And he was like, I had a great conversation with you. That's payment enough. And I was like, wow, Miguel, you're kind of cool. I don't know many people who would do the same. So that's my favorite memory.
Um, Again, I did go on a virtual program, but like I said, I was able to travel to a different country where Arabic was spoken, Turkey. And I guess like my favorite part over there was like haggling prices with people in Arabic and them trying to guess if I was American or not. That was, I guess, my favorite part. Like, are you American? Are you not? They would hear my English and I'd be like, I'm not. I would like trick them and play games. But like, yeah, going to the bazaar and like, arguing about prices in Arabic was very fun. And then like in terms of the virtual program, I did a lot of presentations about American culture in Arabic, so that was nice. Like I taught them about July 4th and like Thanksgiving or like things that we did here. So I really was able to do a lot of like cultural exchange in that sense. Teaching them about things we do here in America, but like in the Arabic language. So everybody was really interested, and that was pretty fun. So yeah.
All right, thank you both for sharing. All right, so I'm going to close out this session. So this concludes today's Study Abroad Scholarship Opportunities panel. On behalf of CULTR, I thank you all for joining us. As a reminder that recordings of all panel discussions this week will be made available after the event. I invite you to complete the post-event survey available right after the Zoom session closes. The next World Languages Week discussion is the Language Industry panel, which will take place today from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, and thanks again to my panelists, Pernell in the chat, everyone from CULTR for making this possible. And thank you all for joining us today.